The Tomb of Moving Stones and A Walk in the Hills. After defeating the cultists who died in the name of what they screened as the Black Earth, you collect the valuables resting beneath the petrified dwarf and decide to head west towards where the cultists were referring to as being the direction from which they were expecting you. However, as you are discussing these next steps, Mweza sneaks off without anyone else noticing, deciding to flank the other room. As he does this, the rest of you perceive someone behind the door and engage in a broken conversation with who you think is Grund, the dim-witted half-orc you saw milling about the marketplace, who appears to be somehow wrapped up in all this, attempting to get him to give up his position. Meanwhile, Mweza moves towards the room from the west, but then triggers an elaborate cage trap Grund is manning. Darting and rolling down the passageway, Mweza avoids being caught by 4 cages in a row before finally being incarcerated. The rest of you only hear the loud rattling of many iron chains and crashes before Mweza is no longer amongst you. Losing patience, you decide, sans Mweza, to enter the room from the eastern doorway and find it is dominated by a single 8-foot standing obelisk. You spot Grund near a row of 10 levers attached to the chains you heard earlier, and Leyloon, with her devil's sight, spots Mweza through a small open spy slot in the opposite door, seeing that he is imprisoned. As you close in, you spot a disturbing sight in some rubble near the obelisk. A young boy appears to be deliberately pinned beneath heavy rocks placed on his arms and legs. This infuriates you, causing you to attack Grund with fervour. The half-orc has no chance and surrenders. With Mweza released, you interrogate Grund and learn that he is as dim-witted as he seems. Meanwhile, you also free the young boy, who you learn is called Braylon Hazelhand and is 10 years old. Bruised and confused, he first resists your attempts to free him, saying his father told him he must be punished. You heal him to make him more coherent, and through discussion with both the half-orc and the young boy, you learn that the ruling elite of Red Larch are part of a secret society called the Believers. The Believers put Braylon here as punishment for being disobedient because he failed to deliver a message from his father to Ilmeth Whalver of the Wagon Works. It was a slip of paper he didn't read. The boy says that his father, Rothar Haverhand, is one of the Believers. Other Believers Braylon knows about are Baragustus Buckler, a retired carpenter, Marlandro Gelka, the local barber, and Ilmeth Whalver. The boy also knows Grund isn't really a believer, but the Believers feed him, so he does what they tell him to do. After some gentle interrogation, you learn that Believers are a secret group made up of some of the most important people in town. They guard a room of moving stones further in the complex and make sure no one disturbs the Delvers, believed to be ancient custodians of the stones and who are entombed here. The Believers watch the moving stones carefully because it's a bad sign when they move, and they have to figure out what it means to avert danger. You realise that Braylon isn't angry with his father or the Believers. He thinks this sort of treatment is normal, and he's worried his father might find out the punishment ended before it was supposed to. You reassure him that things will be okay. Finally, you learn that the Chamber of Moving Stones and the buried Delvers are to the east, beyond more stone doors. You are told that Baragustus Buckler, the caretaker of this place, is further that way, as well as a strange priest called Larach. Leaving both Braylon and Grund behind, you head east, expecting a confrontation with this Baragustus. Opening the door, you are greeted by a middle-aged man looking extremely nervous and begging you to leave the Tomb of Moving Stones. You waste no time attacking, but are confused at how easily he is defeated, realizing he was just a commoner and probably a victim of deception himself. You feel more than a little guilty at putting him to the sword. Putting that behind you, you steel yourself to face Larach and enter the Tomb of Moving Stones. You open a door onto a massive chamber filled here and there with obelisks, with some of them spanned by lintels. At the opposite end of the room cower 3 villagers in black robes, looking guilty as hell but scared for their lives. Lorach does not appear to be anywhere until a shadowy figure leans out from behind one of the stones in the act of casting a spell. Despite this, you react quickest and make short work of the cultist before he's even able to get a spell off, and it's clear from his garb that he had some evil tricks up his sleeve. Searching him, he wears a brown robe with the familiar triangle symbol you've seen before. You also find 4 Mirabar trade bars worth 5 gold pieces each. Strange currency for a cultist in these parts to have. By the end of the fight, the villagers have huddled into a corner of the room and exclaim their innocence. You identify them as Ulro Lurath the Tanner, Alberi Melicho of the local stoneworks, and Ilmuth Whalver, and they are all wearing black cloaks. You take a moment to register the difference in the cloaks of those who wear brown with the strange symbol, and those of Red Larch who wear black, and wonder if one has been influencing the other. The battle cry heard in the room with the petrified dwarf causes you to name the brown cloaks the Black Earth Cultists. You think the black cloaks are the daft locals who refer to themselves as the Believers. Whilst considering this, there is a cacophony of noise from the west and a rumbling of moving earth, and it is clear there has been a collapse of somewhere. In the meantime, both Lady Helfi and Mueza solve the riddle of the moving stones and realise that sudden significant impact on the floor of the room causes the stones here to float 3 feet into the air so that they can be easily pushed around. The effect lasts but 1 minute and can be repeated any number of times. There is no knowledge gained of the source of the magic or its purpose, but Lady Helfi's historical knowledge points to the place being thousands of years old and dwarven in build. Also, Quirky's examination of the remains of the Delvers that are kept in repose here reveals that they are unremarkable and likely to be the skeletons of dead miners due to their injuries. The Believers appear to have mistaken common working men for revered beings in their desperation to find meaning. Wanting to interrogate the villagers further, but intrigued at the sound of a collapse, you head towards the source of the noise and find that the cave ceiling near the entrance has fallen in, revealing the night sky above and a lot of confused villagers looking in. Harburg and his 4 deputies are busy trying to stop people getting too close and falling in, but then spots you and asks what you've done. Ladders are retrieved and used to rescue you, and you are able to quickly recount the events of the past hour, exhibiting your captive villagers as evidence. Harburg is dismayed, but also delighted you have done much of his work for him. He takes the villagers away for questioning and suggests you get some rest at the Swinging Sword. Whilst at the inn, you are the centre of attention as many villagers want to be apprised of events. However, one visitor to Red Larch grabs your attention, a half-elf priest of Lathander called Brother Earden. He has heard you've been asking questions about the missing Mirabar delegation and has some information to share, but he suggests it waits till morning, given that your account of recent events is currently in demand. After a busy night of tale-telling and a well-earned rest, Leyloon rises early and decides to buy some pearls to enable her to identify the magic in some of your combined loot. Understanding that Valivo's sundries might be the place, she heads straight there and meets Endrith Valivo, an intriguing fellow who is happy to sell some pearls, but is also after someone who can read Dwarvish, as he came into possession of an old dwarven tome in recent days. Leyloon takes the time to cast a ritual to enable her to understand Dwarvish, and learns that the book is an ancient tome of dwarven genealogy based on the local region, which appears to have been a dwarven kingdom called Besselmer, founded in minus 4420 by a Dale reckoning, by Torhild Flametongue of old, and that the kingdom sat above an underground redoubt called Tyre Bessel. Clearly, the book is a rich treasure of information, so after Leyloon asks where Valivo obtained it, he admits to buying it from a ne'er-do-well from Wamford, a tiny port of rogues on the Desserin River, who said he obtained it from a river pirate called Shola. Despite these facts, Valavo acts confident that his purchase was legitimate. Leyloon returns to the party to share this information, but not before bumping into Larman Greenboot, one of the shepherds once met on the road to Lance Rock. After some words of greeting, Larman shares that he has seen 4 new shallow graves on his travels and thought you the best people to tell. He offers to take you there if you're interested, letting you know that it is close to Feathergale Spire, a large tower in the Somber Hills. Leyloon stores his information away and heads to the Swinging Sword. Entering the inn, Leyloon joins her companions in a large breakfast whilst awaiting Brother Earden to stop chatting Kaelessa up, so that he can tell you his news about the Mirabar delegation. After taking notes on Elven chat-up lines, you learn from the priest that the delegation left Beliard 2 weeks ago and was heading to Goldenfields via Summit Hall, where a fallen knight was due to be interred. The priest does not know much more than this, but at least it helps you understand the route the delegation was taking. You discuss your choices, given that Harburg is taking care of the Believers situation in Red Larch. These are: either travel to Beliard and track the delegation, travel to Wamford and find the source of the Dwarven Tome, or travel with Larman to investigate the shallow graves. You choose the latter, but before you leave Red Larch, Weza the Beastmaster introduces you to his new pet, a giant crab that is waiting outside of the inn and scaring the hell out of the locals. He offers no explanation of how it reached landlocked Red Larch, and you do not think you'd get an answer if you asked. He grins a toothy grin and skips ahead, giant crab in tow, as you travel with Larman the Shepherd, spending a couple of days in the wild, hilly terrain before reaching the site of the shallow graves. Once there, you examine the surroundings and find clear evidence of a violent struggle. Exhuming 4 bodies, you identify that 2 of the dead are dressed in the colours of Mirabar. 1 is a Black Earth cultist and 1 is dressed in a white feathered robe with another symbol on it that you have not seen before. In the distance, you spot what Larman tells you is Feathergale Spire, and you think it too coincidental that the tower is this close to the graves, and so you decide to travel that way, bidding the talkative shepherd farewell. Your journey through the hills is without incident, but it is clear that the aerial sentries of the spire, mounted on hippogriffs and giant vultures, have spotted you from miles away. That said, you arrive at the fantastic site without any intervention and ring the bell of the drawbridge. Thank you for listening to the progress of my Dungeons & Dragons group as they make their way through the Princes of the Apocalypse campaign setting. Watch out for further episodes where we shall learn what happens at Feathergale Spire and whether there is a link to the bodies found in the shallow graves, or indeed the missing Mirabar delegation.